Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Native English. If you've ever felt stuck or unsure about how to really improve your English, this one's for you. We're not just talking about the usual advice like practice every day or watch movies in English. Nope. Today we're diving into practical, hands on tips that you can actually start using right away. In my experience teaching English, I've seen these tips work wonders for learners. We'll talk about things like how shadowing native speakers can help you sound more natural, how recording yourself gives instant feedback on your progress, and why mastering sentence patterns is more effective than just focusing on grammar rules. These are strategies that really make a difference. Whether you're just starting out or refining your skills, they'll help you feel more confident and fluent. Stick around. This episode is packed with useful insights that'll take your English learning to the next level. Let's get started. Let's start with one of the most powerful tools in learning English, phrasal verbs. Now, if you're not familiar with the term, phrasal verbs are those 2 or 3 word phrases where a verb is combined with a preposition or adverb to create a new meaning. For example, clean up, run into, or figure out. They're used all the time in everyday English, especially in casual conversation. But here's the tricky part. Phrasal verbs aren't always easy to figure out just by looking at the words separately. You can't simply translate them word for word and get the meaning. Take the phrase run into, for example. You might think it means literally running into something, but it often means to meet someone unexpectedly, like, I ran into my old teacher at the store. See what I mean? The whole meaning changes depending on the context. Now, instead of memorizing long lists of phrasal verbs, which can be overwhelming, you'll want to learn them in context. Here's how you can approach it. First, pick 5 phrasal verbs at a time. Don't try to learn dozens all at once. Let's take a few examples. Clean up, run into, figure out, give up, and pick up. Look for sentences where these phrasal verbs are used naturally. For instance, I need to clean up my room. She ran into her friend at the park. Can you figure out how to solve this problem? Don't give up. You're almost there. I'll pick up the groceries on my way home. Notice how each of these sentences shows the phrasal verb in action, making it much easier to understand and remember. Once you see how they're used, try to create your own sentences. The goal here is to use them in your daily life. For example, when texting a friend, you could say, I ran into someone I knew today, or I need to clean up before the guests arrive. This approach is so much more effective than just memorizing definitions because it shows you how the phrasal verbs actually work in real life. And when you use them in your own conversations, they'll start to stick. Your brain will begin to associate certain phrasal verbs with real situations, making it easier to recall them when you need them. Now, why is this method so helpful? Well, phrasal verbs are extremely common in informal, everyday English. If you're aiming for fluency, understanding and using phrasal verbs naturally will help you sound more like a native speaker. It'll also make conversations feel smoother because you won't be stuck translating every word in your head. Plus, using phrasal verbs properly shows that you really understand the nuances of the language, something that's key when communicating effectively. Another great thing about learning phrasal verbs in context is that it helps you avoid confusion. Many phrasal verbs have multiple meanings depending on how they're used. For example, pick up can mean to lift something. I'll pick up the book. Or to learn something quickly. She picked up the language fast. When you learn these verbs through examples, you'll understand how their meanings change in different situations, so you're less likely to misuse them. So, the next time you come across a new phrasal verb, don't just memorize the definition. Look for examples, practice using it, and pay attention to the context. It's one of the most effective ways to improve your fluency and sound more natural in English. All right, let's move on to our second tip, which is shadowing native speakers. This technique is one of the most powerful ways to improve your pronunciation, rhythm, and overall fluency in English. But what exactly is shadowing? It's simple. You listen to a native speaker, whether it's in a podcast, video, or movie, and then you immediately repeat what they say. The idea is to mimic their speech as closely as possible, like you're their shadow. You're copying their speed, intonation, and accent. Now, why is shadowing so effective? Well, when you speak a new language, your brain needs time to get used to its sounds and rhythm. English, for example, has a particular flow that might be different from your native language. Shadowing helps train your brain to pick up on that natural flow of speech. You'll start to notice the way native speakers stress certain words, how they connect their sentences, and even the little pauses they take. All of this helps you speak more naturally without sounding robotic or rehearsed. Also, when you shadow, you're not just practicing individual words or phrases, you're working on entire sentences. This helps you get used to speaking at a normal pace, so you won't feel like you're translating in your head or struggling to keep up in conversations. Now, let's talk about how you can do this easily. Start by picking a short clip, a YouTube video, a podcast, or even a scene from a movie. It could be a news broadcast or a talk show, whatever interests you. Listen to a sentence, then pause the clip and repeat what you heard. Try to match the speaker's tone, speed, and even emotion. If the speaker sounds excited, try to sound excited too. If they're speaking slowly and calmly, mirror that. It's all about mimicking them as closely as possible. If you're just starting out, it's okay to slow the audio down. Many platforms like YouTube let you adjust the playback speed. This way, you can get used to the rhythm before speeding it up to a normal pace. Shadowing regularly, even for just a few minutes each day, can make a big difference in how you speak. It's like doing a workout for your mouth and brain, training them to communicate like a native English speaker. All right, let's dive into our third tip, which is all about mastering sentence structures, not just grammar rules. This one is key if you want to speak English more naturally and confidently. So, what do I mean by sentence structures? Basically, instead of obsessing over grammar rules like verb tenses and prepositions, you focus on how sentences are built. The most common structure in English is subject, verb plus object. For example, she eats breakfast. Simple, right? Now, think about how many other sentences you can form with this same structure. You could say, he reads books, or they play soccer. The pattern stays the same, and you can swap out the subject, verb, or object depending on what you want to say. Now, why is this approach so helpful? In my experience, many learners get stuck because they're too focused on grammar rules. They're worried about making mistakes, so they hesitate when speaking. But if you focus on key sentence patterns, you can start forming sentences much more quickly and naturally. You don't have to think about every little detail, just follow the structure. For example, if you know the pattern for asking questions like, what did you do yesterday? Then you can also ask, where did you go last week? Or when did you finish your homework? You're simply plugging different words into the same structure. This method helps you use English rather than just think about it. And that's exactly what we want, real life usage. So, how can you practice this easily? Start with the basic structures. For instance, practice making different sentences with I ate breakfast, he drove to work, and they watched TV. Once you're comfortable with these simple patterns, you can start expanding them. Maybe add a little more detail, like I ate breakfast at 7 a.m., or they watched TV after dinner. The key is to practice creating sentences that feel natural rather than focusing too much on individual grammar rules. You can also challenge yourself by creating questions or negative sentences. If the positive sentence is, she eats breakfast, the negative could be, she doesn't eat breakfast. Or turn it into a question, does she eat breakfast? You're still working with the same basic structure, but you're getting more comfortable with different sentence types. By mastering these sentence patterns, you'll find that speaking and writing in English becomes much smoother. You won't have to stop and think about every word because the structure will already be second nature. Now, let's move on to the next tip, which is one of my personal favorites, recording yourself speaking. This is a really effective way to improve your pronunciation, fluency, and even your confidence. So, how does it work? It's pretty simple. Choose a short paragraph from an article, a podcast, or even a movie script, whatever you find interesting. Then, read it out loud while recording yourself. After that, play back both the original audio, if you're using a podcast, for example, and your recording. As you listen, compare your pronunciation, pace, and intonation with the original. You'll notice where you sound different or where you might need some improvement, whether it's how you pronounce a word, the rhythm of your speech, or your overall fluency. Now, why is this so helpful? In my experience teaching English, I've seen how students often don't realize the mistakes they're making until they hear themselves. When you're speaking in the moment, it's easy to miss pronunciation errors or inconsistencies in your speech. But when you listen to the recording, you can hear exactly where you went wrong. This kind of feedback is instant, and it's incredibly useful because it shows you what needs work right away. Let me give you an example. One of my students had trouble with the pronunciation of the TF sound, like in the words think or that. We worked on it during class, but it wasn't until they recorded themselves and compared it to a native speaker that they really noticed the difference. Once they heard it, they could pinpoint exactly where to improve, and after a few practice sessions, their pronunciation got a lot better. Now, how can you start doing this? All you need is your phone or a simple recording app. Pick a short audio clip, maybe a podcast or a video you enjoy, and find a section that's around 30 seconds long. Record yourself reading or repeating it, then play it back alongside the original. Don't worry if it doesn't sound perfect the first time. The idea is to keep practicing until you close the gap between your speech and the original. By doing this regularly, you'll start to notice real progress. You'll hear your pronunciation improve, your sentences will sound smoother, and over time, you'll build more confidence in your speaking skills. All right, let's jump into another highly practical tip that can make a big difference in your daily communication: creating dialogues based on your daily life. This technique is especially useful because it's tailored to your routine, which means you're preparing for conversations you're actually going to have. So, how does this work? You start by thinking about the situations you find yourself in regularly. Maybe you go to a cafe every morning, right? Or you often ask for directions, or you interact with coworkers during meetings. Once you identify these scenarios, you create simple dialogues around them. Let's take the cafe example. A typical conversation might go something like this: "Can I get a cappuccino, please?" "Sure." "Would you like that hot or iced?" "Hot, please." It's straightforward, but here's why it's powerful. By writing and practicing these dialogues, you're preparing yourself for real life conversations. When you walk into a cafe and place your order, you'll feel more confident because you've already practiced that exact situation. You won't be scrambling to think of the right words, and your speech will sound more natural. Why is this technique so effective? In my experience teaching English, I've seen how much of a difference it makes when students prepare for conversations they're actually going to have. It's one thing to memorize random phrases or vocab words, but it's much more practical and useful to practice dialogues that fit into your daily life. If you're getting ready for a meeting at work, write out some of the things you might say. If you're preparing to travel, practice ordering food, asking for directions, or checking into a hotel. Here's an easy way to get started. Choose one or two scenarios from your day. It could be anything from going to the store to calling a friend. Write out a short dialogue for each situation, then practice it aloud. If possible, grab a friend or a language partner and act it out together. The more you practice, the more natural it'll feel when you face these situations in real life. This kind of practice helps you build confidence and fluency because you're ready for the conversations you're most likely to have. Over time, you'll find that you're not just memorizing phrases, you're actually using English in a way that's meaningful and practical for your everyday life. Let's talk about a simple method to improve your reading skills: the 5-finger rule. This technique helps you find material that matches your reading level. Here's how it works. Pick up a book or article and open it to a random page. Start reading, and each time you encounter a word you don't know, raise one finger. When you finish the page, count how many fingers you have raised. If you have 5 or more, the text might be too advanced. In that case, find something easier and try again. This rule is helpful because reading difficult texts can be discouraging. You may feel overwhelmed if you're constantly stopping to look up words, which can make reading less enjoyable. I've seen students struggle with challenging texts and feel lost, leading to frustration and little retention of new vocabulary. Using the 5-finger rule helps you discover reading material that's better suited to your level. When you choose something that's challenging but manageable, you can learn new vocabulary and context. You'll grasp the main ideas without getting stuck on too many unfamiliar words, which keeps you engaged. To reinforce what you read, try summarizing the content afterward. If you find a text that works for you, read it, then write a short summary or discuss it with someone. This practice solidifies your understanding and helps you remember new words. The five finger rule is a powerful way to make reading more enjoyable and effective. It helps you find texts that challenge you without overwhelming you, building your vocabulary and confidence. Next time you read, give this method a try. We've made it to the last tip, and I want to thank you all for listening and sticking with us. This final tip is about using a dictionary app with audio to boost your vocabulary. When you come across a new word, grab your smartphone and open a dictionary app like Merriam-Webster or Cambridge. These apps often provide audio pronunciations, which is incredibly helpful. Don't just focus on the meaning of the word, pay close attention to how it's pronounced in real-life contexts. Hearing the word pronounced correctly can make a big difference in your speaking skills. It helps you understand the rhythm and intonation, making it easier to use the word naturally in conversation. For example, if you learn the word garrulous, don't just memorize that it means talkative. Listen to how it sounds and try to repeat it in sentences like, "My garrulous neighbor talks for hours." Using a dictionary app also allows you to hear different accents and variations of pronunciation. This is particularly beneficial if you're aiming to understand various English dialects, whether it's American, British, or Australian. In my teaching experience, I've noticed that students who regularly use dictionary apps with audio become more confident speakers. They are better at incorporating new vocabulary into their speech because they know how to pronounce it correctly. So the next time you encounter an unfamiliar word, don't hesitate to look it up in a dictionary app with audio. This simple practice will enhance your vocabulary and help you speak more naturally. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope these tips inspire you to continue your English learning journey. As we near the end of this episode, let's quickly summarize what we talked about today. We covered 7 useful tips for learning English. 1. Learn phrasal verbs in context. 2. Shadow native speakers. 3. Master sentence structures, not just grammar rules. 4. Record yourself speaking. 5. Create dialogues based on your daily life. 6. Use the 5-finger rule for reading. 7. Use a dictionary app with audio. This is all the content we have for today. I encourage you to review the free PDF script of this episode we've provided to help reinforce what we discussed. If you have any questions or if there's an interesting English topic you'd like us to cover in the next episode, please leave a comment. We love hearing from you. Don't forget to follow and stay tuned for our next episode of Daily Native English. Thanks for listening, and keep practicing your English.